On November 21st, 2025, at exactly 3:40 p.m. Indian time, light combat aircraft Tejas crashed during a high-G aerobatic routine at the Dubai Airshow. In front of thousands of spectators, tragically, the jet entered a vertical climb, attempted to roll, and then simply failed to regain altitude. Seconds later, it slammed into the ground at high speed and erupted into a massive fireball. There was no ejection, and the Indian Air Force just confirmed that the pilot died instantly. And this brings us to the fact that this is the second crash in Tejas' history. Because what happened on the world's largest aerospace stage, the shockwaves are enormous. Let me break down exactly what happened, what the investigation will look for, and why this single crash opens up decades of political, engineering, and strategic questions inside India's fighter jet ecosystem. Let's start with the bare facts. The Dubai crash happened during a scheduled aerobatic display at AI Makuttam International Airport. Eyewitnesses recorded the jet climbing sharply, rolling, and then losing energy far too quickly. The aircraft descended almost vertically, struck the ground, and disintegrated. Emergency crews reached the site in under 2 minutes. The seat was in place, and there were no signs of an attempt to eject. Now, let's compare this to the first Tejas crash. This happened in March 2024 near Jaisalmer in India. The pilot did eject safely, and the court of inquiry concluded that the engine seizure happened because of an oil pump shaft failure, which led to a lubrication loss and compressor stall. Fleet inspections found no systemic fault, and it was classified as an isolated component failure. So that is like 2 crashes across a fleet of roughly 42 operational Tejas, Mark 1 and Mark 1A jets. Statistically, that's a low rate, especially when you compare it to India's historical experience with Russian jets. The MiG-21 alone has had over hundreds of crashes and few pilot deaths. And then the MiG-27 has also seen crashes. Even the modern Sukhoi 30 has had 11 crashes since induction. Against this backdrop, Tejas' incident rate is actually modest, but optics matter, and an accident on an international stage hits very differently. To understand this, why this one crash has become a lightning rod, we need to go back to the beginning. The Light Combat Aircraft program started in 1984. Its purpose was simple: give India an indigenous fighter jet to replace the aging MiG-21s. But what followed were decades of delays. Tejas' first flight only happened in 2001, and initial operation clearance came after a full 29 years after the program began. And the first squadron entered service only in 2016. In 2025, India has around 40 Tejas jets. But why did it take so long? It was because there were disagreements between the DRDO and HAL over the certification of indigenous systems, particularly the radar and the electronic warfare suite. And also, the Kaveri engine project, which was supposed to power Tejas, failed to reach operational thrust levels. And crucially, after the 1998 Pokhran nuclear test, the US imposed sanctions and blocked deliveries of GE F404 engines. This alone set the program back by several years. Add to that the complexities of building a modern fly-by-wire fighter jet from scratch, the dependence on imported avionics, and the sheer challenge of certifying a new airframe, and you get 4 decades of delay. Even recently, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Anil Chauhan, and multiple Air Force leaders have criticized the slow pace of development, citing the Tejas as a prime example of delayed timelines, hurting India's modernization drive. Now let's be blunt. One of the setbacks in the Tejas program is its engine, because it is politically dependent on Indo-US relationship. As we know, that could be a fragile link. The jet uses a foreign engine, the GE F404 IN-20, and this dependence is not optional because the indigenous Kaveri engine developed by GTRE never met thrust requirements. India has repeatedly attempted to partner with Safran in France, General Electric in the US, and Rolls-Royce in the UK for joint engine development. But here is the geopolitical reality. The US has already stopped engine deliveries once. If they can do it then, they can do it again, which means every single Tejas flying today relies on an international supply chain that India does not fully control. This is why the Dubai crash immediately triggers questions about engine reliability. Because if the cost turns out to be a power plant issue, the consequences go far beyond the one aircraft. These triggers questions about engine reliability because if it turns out to be an engine issue, the consequences go far beyond this one aircraft. To understand why Tejas matters so much, we need to look at India's fighter ecosystem. For most of its history, India relied almost entirely on Russia. Across 60 years, India has inducted hundreds of Russian origin combat aircraft, and the losses have also been relatively on the higher side. There is a joke in the defense forces that the Mi-21 crashes so much that it's earned the label flying coffin. India lost more MiG-21s in peace than many countries have lost in war. Tejas finally entered service. It symbolized India's chance to break free from this dependency. This is why the Dubai crash is emotionally and politically charged. It threatens not just an aircraft, but the idea of technological self-reliance. Now let's come back to the core question. What could have caused a modern fighter jet to simply nose down and never recover? So there are three possibilities that stand out. One, that it could be engine failure. Tejas is a single-engine aircraft. If an engine loses thrust during a vertical maneuver, recovery margins are extremely small. Secondly, it could also be a flight control systems failure because Tejas uses a quadruplex digital fly-by-wire system. If one channel misbehaves, especially on the elevator or the pitch, the aircraft can move uncontrollably. The hydraulic or control surfaces could also jam because a jammed elevator or stabilizer at high angle of attack can produce exactly the kind of dive we saw. At the moment, all possibilities remain open. The Dubai crash happened in front of dozens of global customers that India potentially could have had. Countries like Malaysia, the Philippines, Egypt, and Argentina were evaluating the Tejas. Could it have become a cost-effective light fighter? But this accident will force all of them to reassess. Domestically, India will not abandon Tejas. It actually cannot. Not when Russia is struggling, not when China is ramping up its fifth-generation fleet, and not when India needs an indigenous fighter jet. This ecosystem is something that we need for long-term security, and the alternative is to remain dependent indefinitely on foreign suppliers, and whose reliability we can never know, because this is not being shaped by engineering, it's being shaped by politics. So yes, the Tejas crash at Dubai is a tragedy, but it's also a reminder that building a modern fighter jet is brutally hard. Self-reliance in defense is slow, expensive, unforgiving, and sometimes painful. India's challenge now is to learn from this, act decisively, and continue the long, difficult journey towards true aerospace independence.